Bitcoin, it's crashed. In the last 4 years, it's crashed by more than 50%, 3 times. It's going to crash again. And this time, even more people will be impacted.
Data collection has a negative reputation. What must change for people to trust companies that collect and store their data?
People need to understand why companies collect data. So many of these services that we use, whether it's Google or Facebook, they're providing what seems to be a free service. You have to remember, though, that if you're not paying for a product, you're the product. They're collecting your personal information. That's how they're making money. They're using that personal information to target ads, advertisements specifically at you. A lot of things have to change. The laws have changed. The GDPR law in the European Union has spread around the world. Individuals need to retain control of their own personal information. Up until now, the technologies really haven't been there to allow that to happen efficiently. That's changing. Companies are now building their products because of all these great new rules and the penalties. The penalties are massive for violation of GDPR. It's 4% of global gross revenue. That's a massive potential fine. So companies are building their products now because of those concerns with what's called privacy by design. For example, one of my companies is a data collection company. We do surveys globally. One of the questions we asked first was, do we actually need any personal information from people? Anything at all? And we realized, no, we don't. We just need to know generally what people in this area think. So we don't collect any personal information. So that's privacy by design. Other ways privacy by design is done is that all the information is anonymized. So it might be collected in personal information, but it's quickly anonymized. All the other information is deleted. So even if there is a data breach, which is what everyone's concerned about, a cybersecurity breach, then it's just anonymized data that is released. Also, companies need to keep personal information encrypted at all times when it can be encrypted. So if there is, again, a data breach, it's copied, the attacker just gets the encrypted information, which means nothing to them. The latest technology, which allows privacy by design, is very exciting. It's called homomorphic encryption. It allows data to be processed while it's encrypted. So you don't even need to unencrypt it to actually process and use the information. That's the future.
You are a Bitcoin skeptic. What is your biggest criticism of Bitcoin?
Bitcoin is a rigged gambling scam. It's not an investment. It's got all the excitement of gambling with all the incentives to promote like a pyramid scheme and all the fake profits of a Ponzi scheme. At the same time, it's got the legitimacy of trading, but since there's no regulation, the market is completely manipulated. Bitcoin, it's crashed. In the last 4 years, it's crashed by more than 50%, 3 times. It's going to crash again. And this time, even more people will be impacted. 20% of Americans and Europeans are buying on credit. So they're buying with money they can't afford to lose. Many are going to lose their life savings and go bankrupt. People don't understand that it's simply gambling. It's not an investment. The only way to play Bitcoin is not to play the game at all.
Do you believe it's possible for Bitcoin to become less of a Ponzi scheme? And in your own words, how could it possibly do that?
Bitcoin is irredeemable. It's even worse than a Ponzi scheme. It's an open Ponzi scheme. At least with Bernie Madoff's famous Ponzi scheme, there were some assets there. Bitcoin, there's no assets there. With Bernie Madoff's Ponzi, because there were some assets, not the amount of assets he said there were, 100% of the claims under $1.6 million were paid back. And 70% of the claims above $1.6 million were paid back. When the Bitcoin Ponzi collapses, there'll be no assets there and nobody will get anything. And it's even worse than a zero-sum game like that, where there's no assets. It's a negative-sum game. Every year, $1 billion of that money that's pouring in to Bitcoin is being literally burned up in electricity. It's going, this fake mining work, it's just wasting electricity.
Wow.
It's wasting 0.6% of global electricity production. So it's a negative-sum game. It's worse than a Ponzi.
How do you define decentralized finance?
First of all, the motivation. It's similar to the motivation about why some people like Bitcoin, is they don't like the banks. The banks have caused some trouble. There was the 2008 collapse, which they contributed to, but they take a lot of fees. We do transactions, we have to go through banks. For example, we use our credit card and the banks take 2% of every transaction. People who use the credit card may not understand it, but if you're a merchant, you realize that if somebody pays you $100, you're only getting $98. And that is the goal of decentralized finance, is to provide competition to the banks, to allow individuals to transact with other individuals, ideally, or at least through competitive intermediaries. So it isn't just the banks. There are alternatives to banks that are cheaper, faster, better, more efficient.
Having raised $10 million for startup companies, what is your top tip for entrepreneurs hoping to secure investment?
You have to sell and do what you believe in. That way, you'll have the confidence to take the constant no's. You're going to get no's about 90% of the time. But the no's don't matter. It's the yeses that matter. You just need 1 out of every 100 people you talk to say yes. It's, of course, people are going to say no. You generally, you've got a startup idea, especially if it's in the tech area. It's new, and people generally are reluctant to new. A famous Canadian, Wayne Gretzky, said, "You miss every shot you don't take." That should be the attitude raising money. If you believe in what you've got, then you're going to keep going.